This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Detroit is the greatest!
Straight up light you on fire for a Coney dog right now.
Darren McCarty comes back to Neiman in front of him. McCarty draws. McCarty in. McCarty scores! He makes it go! Darren McCarty!
Stafford takes, throws, end zone, Calvin, touchdown, Detroit Lions!
What's up, everybody? It's the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. As always, I am Jason Jarvie, and with me again this week and every week, John the Doc Macaroon, making me wait outside in my car. What's up, John?
It's all good, brother. Listen, I told you what time to come to the office. You're the one that's like, hey, I'm coming early. This office has to do other things as well, brother.
Oh, you gotta keep the lights on. My name's John. Shut up, John. How was your weekend?
It was a great weekend, and I definitely want to talk to you about the events that occurred on Sunday, because there are a large group of people that will say that, hey, the AFC and NFC title games are actually the games they really enjoy that Sunday, probably more than any other Sunday, maybe even more than Super Bowl Sunday. And I found myself kind of watching it and then kind of gauging the reactions from people. So for me, I definitely enjoyed it. I was more passive. I watched it. I was doing a couple other things, playing with the kids and things like that. But for me, knowing that it was two blowout games, I enjoyed it. I wasn't one of those people that complained and said, hey, I needed two great games. Of all the 10 playoff games, only two have been decent. You know what? When a team goes out there and blows out another team, hey, that means they're just playing at a superior level. These two teams, and I called it on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, when I broke down and just looked at basic stats, you just kind of knew that if New England and Atlanta played halfway decent to their capabilities, that those two teams were the best teams. Whether it was a close game or not, listen, Atlanta played so well. They played flawlessly offensively. New England was great. I'm not one of those people that complains and is like, oh my gosh, I need it to be a good game. I passively watched it. I didn't have a rooting interest for no teams, but I don't understand why people are complaining and clamoring for such close games. You got a good game, Green Bay versus Dallas. Why is everybody so picky? What's everyone complaining about?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think probably the biggest thing is that people just want to see good football, and that when you do have more of a blowout, it is, the game's over and you pretty much just tune it out. And with the outcomes, I would have preferred to see Falcons and Steelers, but, with the Steelers, they didn't have Le'Veon Bell for a good portion of that game. And if they weren't going to be completely healthy, I wouldn't have really wanted to see them in the Super Bowl. And to be really honest, we talked about it last week. I was pretty much fine with any Super Bowl matchup as long as it didn't include the Green Bay Packers, because I hate Aaron Rodgers and I hate the Green Bay Packers. And that game, we were celebrating my wife's birthday a week early. We were at a restaurant, so they had the Green Bay Atlanta game on, and I enjoyed watching Green Bay just get run into the ground, and Aaron Rodgers being just such a whiny bitch. And him getting hit, it was wonderful to watch. And I would have been fine if Atlanta would have ran up the score even more. But I think we got like a 23-point victory over the Green Bay Packers. So I was happy with that game. I was a little bit less happy with Patriots Steelers. It was more of I didn't really care who won, but I would have liked to see if Le'Veon Bell be completely healthy, and would they have been able to then stand up to the Patriots? And I think just in the end, the Patriots were going to come out. They were going to win. Part of me, even though I am going to be rooting for the Falcons in the Super Bowl, part of me wants to see the Patriots win so Tom Brady can stick it to Roger Goodell. Because it's basically just the big FU, You drag Deflategate for how long? Over 2 years? And you finally suspend the guy for 4 games just for deflating the balls a little bit? I think that would be the ultimate FU in this no fun league, the NFL. I am just hoping for a good game on Super Bowl Sunday.
And if you just look at the matchups, again, you have a situation where Atlanta's offense is prolific. New England's scoring defense is number 1 in the league. And if both teams play well, you saw the opening line. I believe New England's about a 3.5-point favorite with the over-under set around 58-59. So people are expecting this to be a high-scoring game. And when you have two passing offenses, this should be a game that could be very entertaining. This game could very well come down to the wire, and I'm looking forward to it. So for those that sat there, watched football, and were like, dang, this was not competitive, I'm going to turn it off, I say to you this. It wasn't like it was a 10-3 kind of game and it was not competitive. These were games where Atlanta and New England both performed very well. I mean, New England had the flea flicker. You had Tom Brady playing flawlessly. Both of them had over 300 yards passing, multiple touchdowns, key plays. Listen, if the other team doesn't show up, it's not their fault. These two teams that won deserve to be in the Super Bowl, and I just feel like people want way too much. You have to appreciate what you did see. You saw two offenses go out there and kick some ass, and I really believe that, Dan Quinn is a solid up-and-coming head coach, has the experience coming from Seattle. You got Bill Belichick, and so these next 2 weeks I'm going to be loving, and at this point in time, just sitting here talking about it, I'm not exactly sure who has the edge right now because you got two teams that I really think want it and have talent across the board. It's going to be who performs on that Sunday. More often than not, you would think it's going to be New England, but for those that complain, I just feel like, when you watch football and you watch sports, just because the matchup isn't close and there's not drama back and forth doesn't mean the game was terrible. If you really look deeper and saw the offensive execution, we would die here in Detroit if Matthew Stafford was that flawless on offense, what Matt Ryan and Tom Brady were able to do. We would flip our shit if we got to see that. And what I clamor for all year long, there's no rule that says it has to be a 7-point game. I was just thinking throughout the whole matchups, both games, I was like, you know what? If Jim Caldwell was coaching these games or coaching these teams, it'd be a one-score game.
I said exactly the same thing. It was at halftime, Green Bay, Atlanta, with I forget what exactly the score was, but Atlanta was up big over Green Bay. Like they scored right at the end of the half, and I look over to my brother and I say, if that was the Lions Packers and we had that lead, the Lions would come out, they'd be super conservative, and Green Bay would be able to get back into this game. And as long as Atlanta is able to come back out and play the same way that they've been playing all game, they have this wrapped up. And that's exactly what they did. They came out. Aaron Rodgers did what Aaron Rodgers does. There was a drive I watched where, he made a 4th and long completion, which if you give Aaron Rodgers more than like 8 seconds in the pocket, defenders can't cover guys for that long. Somebody's going to be open, so that's why some of those plays were made. But I think in the end, you got probably the best matchup. I think you could argue that Green Bay at New England would be an interesting matchup too, because you'd have Rodgers, Brady, but those guys don't go head to head. I think that game would be that has more potential to be a blowout game, because I think Brady could just pick apart that Green Bay defense, because that Green Bay defense is super suspect, and they've just been losing defensive backs week after week after week, and I think it finally just caught up with them. So I'm really excited for this game, and people need to still tune in. They're gonna tune in. It's the Super Bowl. I think as long as Atlanta doesn't come out and lay an egg, it's gonna be a good game.
So prior to the game, I kind of watched the coverage. I saw what the panel of experts said on a variety of networks, television, radio, and a lot of people fell in love with Aaron Rodgers. I as well. Listen, when you
did. You love Aaron Rodgers, you douche.
Because he was able to take a team that was not super talented and look where he got them. But when I started to make the predictions, listen, I'm no NFL expert here. I'm just a big sports fan that has a big mouth and likes to talk. But all I did was start looking at rankings. Atlanta, in terms of offensive production and big plays, was first across the board in terms of plays above 10 yards. You had Matt Ryan and Julio Jones far exceeding anything Green Bay had. They were at home. So I was just fascinated and flabbergasted that, so quote unquote, experts would pick Green Bay just on the basis, if you believe anything at all about football, that one guy playing that well could carry his entire team to the Super Bowl. It's been done. But you realize that if it was in Green Bay, I could understand that prediction much more. But if you really researched it and spent maybe 5 to 6 minutes just looking at the matchups across the board, There was no conceivable way in my mind that it would be logical to pick Green Bay over Atlanta. Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, that defense, the ability to extend plays with the running game, with that trio of running backs that Atlanta features, I was just thinking to myself, wow, they really did fall under the spell of Aaron Rodgers. But I was just thinking to myself, listen, if Aaron Rodgers was going to have a Herculean feat and get them to the Super Bowl, that would have been something. But Matt Ryan and Atlanta stopped that right away. They came out and they punched Green Bay right in the mouth. And what happens is you see it early. When a team is not exactly confident and believe that they can win, you start missing field goals. You start missing opportunities. And that's what Green Bay did. They had opportunities to keep the game close in the early possessions, but they didn't have the confidence. They didn't have the belief that they were going to beat Atlanta because they knew it. The Green Bay Packers knew that they were outmatched in several areas in that game, and I'm just totally shocked that people thought that one guy could defeat a really solid team in Aaron Rodgers. I was shocked.
In watching that Atlanta offense, I have to say that I was extremely jealous looking at what they're able to do. And on that Julio Jones touchdown run where he basically just runs past everybody, stiff arms the guy in the face, and I'm like, could Calvin Johnson ever do that?
He did do that.
He did do that, but he didn't do it in any meaningful game. I mean, if Calvin Johnson would have done that in an NFC Championship game, yes, he would. I think he would definitely go down as one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. And just, I'm watching the game with my brother. I'm like, Calvin probably not going to be one of the greats. Julio Jones, that's going to live forever as an NFC Championship game. And if they go on and actually win a Super Bowl, Julio Jones propels himself to be one of the best receivers of his time right now. And he could end up, in, top 10, top 5, where Calvin Johnson, he had all the stats, but he wasn't on any good teams. And he left early. So and I think the biggest difference between what the Lions offense has and what the Atlanta offense has to be their running game. They have a two-headed monster in Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. Both of those guys are capable rushers. Both of those guys can catch the ball in the backfield. We have absolutely zero of that. Even if we had one running back who could do that, I think the possibilities are limitless for this Lions team.
Listen, Jason, everyone, again, makes excuses for Matthew Stafford. He had arguably a Hall of Fame wide receiver in Calvin Johnson. Did he over-target him? Why was it that they, didn't have that much playoff success or that frequent of playoff experience? Not that many appearances in the playoffs.
But he had nothing else. He had nothing else.
Listen,
Matt Ryan he's pretty much always had a pretty solid wide receiver and a running back. He's either had Roddy White in his prime, and then he had Julio Jones out and Roddy White, and then finally now Julio Jones he's probably one of the best 3 wide receivers right now in the league. He has one of the best running backs in the league, and another one who could arguably start on pretty much any team in the NFL.
One name, Chris Hogan. That doesn't just kind of tell you that a quarterback could make a receiver?
You're talking about the best quarterback to probably ever play in the NFL. Tom Brady, yeah, he made Chris Hogan. And I said that in Fantasy Nerds, that Chris Hogan he's going to be a sleeper because Tom Brady's just going to connect up with him. He's another quick, shifty guy who's almost exactly like Julian Edelman.
If you're going to commit 25 to 30 million per and you want to continue to surround him, how is that going to even be possible? If you were willing to pay someone that much money, he has to make somebody. Matthew Stafford has to make a receiver. You can't just keep saying, throw him this and throw him that. There are no perfect scenarios. I mean, if you give him a running back, the running back could get injured. You could give him an offensive line, but, there could be a play here or play there that he's got to make. And so I think we just have to stop making excuses.
How did this get back to Stafford?
Because it always will get back to Stafford, because the number one thing as Lions fans that we do, and we all did it in the New England game, and I'm going to bring that up in just a few minutes, when we look at these games, everybody in Detroit watches and goes, okay, how would the Lions have performed in this situation? How could the Lions look what do they need to do in order to come to this game? What do they need to do to get this organization to that level? Right now, if the Lions got into the postseason and maybe won a game and they go up against a Green Bay or an Atlanta, they'd be the team on the receiving end of an ass whooping. And we say, okay, what do we need? You need a quarterback playing well. Stafford can get to that level. You need a defense. You need a somewhat of an above-average running game. You need a good head coach to call, a solid game and to clean up any mistakes. You need a lot of those things. So people will assess and say that, hey, my Lions are pretty much far away in terms of getting to the elite. But
because of any of those things, they maybe only have one, because I think Stafford, he does have that ability to play at a high level. But any of those other things you mentioned, defense, running game, head coach, we have none of those. We don't have any of those things that can rise to the occasion and to get us that victory.
Well, the number one thing you say is, can you just ride a hot quarterback to the postseason? And many will say, hey, we don't want to be the Green Bay Packers. We want to be a team like the Falcons or the New England Patriots, where there's a little bit more consistency.
I'll be any of those. Any of those teams have actually won a playoff game in the last 25 years.
Exactly. Look at the stats. I mean,
I'll be the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have won a playoff game in the last 25 years, haven't they?
Well, the Lions, what do you want to be like? Do you want them to build a little bit more towards being like Green Bay, where they just have so talent and rely a little bit more on Matthew Stafford? Or do they got to be like Atlanta and just really hulk up and improve in a lot of different areas?
I'd go with the second, because I think there's so many areas where we need to improve. We need to improve in linebacker. We probably need some help on the D-line. You need help in the secondary. You need more depth on the offensive line, and you for sure need a running back. And I don't think you can get everything in one offseason.
Okay, so there was a play in the New England game that everybody saw here in Detroit and was like, oh boy, here we go. Kyle Van Noy, linebacker, kind of had an auspicious start in his career in Detroit. Couldn't get on the field. When he did, he looked a little bit lost. He was injured. And so Bob Quinn was like, okay, this isn't going to work here. Trades him off to New England. And now he's playing in the Bill Belichick 3-4 system, and he made a play. He forced a fumble, and of course, everybody in Detroit flipped out, and they say to themselves, oh boy, here we go. A guy that goes to another organization, does some things for another team, but where was he? In Detroit. And my first thought was, I think everybody kind of realized that in the scheme that the Lions were running, it just wasn't suiting his skills at all. New England runs a 3-4, and he thrives a little bit better, and then you have to believe this. Jason, it's fairly realistic to make the point and to state the fact that any player currently on the Detroit Lions, if he went over and signed with the New England Patriots, would perform a lot better, would fit, because Bill Belichick arguably is one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time. He could probably motivate somebody better. He could probably find the ins and outs of a player's game at this point in time in his career relatively quickly. And everybody talks about how great Bill Belichick is. And so I don't get too mad, because I realize that, hey, if Matthew Stafford was on New England, he'd be talked about as one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. It's not only a mindset that he built over there, it's a situation where he has this thing where he lets everybody know that, hey, you're interchangeable. There's nobody bigger than the team, even Tom Brady. There's nobody bigger than Bill Belichick, and there's nobody bigger than the organization and structure that he built there. So to see Kyle Van Noy make a play, I don't believe that, if he was on the Lions, he'd be doing these things. And so, hey, there's going to be players that shuffle all the time, and you're going to realize that if you make a stop in New England, and whoever that may be, the coaching there probably is going to get more out of the talent than the Lions here. And so that's why we hope that with continuity that the Lions are able to have some success and to get more out of players. And arguably they've been doing that. They've been getting some things out of the players they have here.
Yeah, and definitely. And I think there's a lot of reasons why Kyle Van Noy succeeded more on the Patriots. Kyle Van Noy came in under a different regime. I think he wasn't drafted by the Bob Quinn, and I don't think he ever really fit in Terrell Austin's defense. And so right there is number one. We have a 4-3, they have a 3-4. So already he's more of an edge rusher. And as much as we may have hoped and wanted him to succeed on the Lions, it just never ever worked out. They didn't find a spot for him. And you also got to look at that he was injured for good portions of the time that he was with us. So I'd like to say that it didn't make a difference him going over to the Patriots, but I can't discount that at all, because you're right. Bill Belichick is one of the best head coaches, and Matt Patricia gets a lot out of his defenses. So you can't say that he would have made those kinds of plays on the Lions unless you transplanted all that coaching staff onto the Lions, because I think it's just a perfect scenario that Kyle Van Noy went into.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I know people feel like, wow, why couldn't we get something out of Kyle Van Noy? But it's one of those things where you recognize as a GM, listen, can this guy thrive here? If not, you move along, try to get anything out of him, whether it be a low-round draft pick or whatever. You just got to move on from certain players. And certain players may just not fit your system and may be better off somewhere else. And they recognize that, and they didn't leave him on the team to suffer and things like that. So you give him credit for moving on. And that's what has to develop here with the Lions, that you have to coach to a standard. And when you coach to a standard, you get players out there that will help your team meet the goals that you have. And so that's why the biggest thing that people critique about the Lions is, do you believe that a player in a regime led by Jim Caldwell is going to get you to where you need to go? I sit here saying, not particularly. I don't feel confident at all. When the Lions match up against better opponents, you just see the same kind of thing. Conservative, try to win the game late, and don't take any puncher's chances. A play that a beautifully designed play was when New England ran the flea flicker. It was excellent. You go, oh my gosh, why can't the Lions run that? Hell, if they would run it, it would be guarded. Why? Because I don't know, if the defenses don't respect the Lions, they don't have enough of a running game to warrant the safety coming up at all, or they just exploited, the fact that maybe Pittsburgh and the Steelers weren't paying attention and would fall for that play. But to see the creativity, to see what they're able to do with an offense, you don't think Matthew Stafford could run a trick play, could do something to get a large chunk play? They just seem to rely upon the fact that they wanted Golden Tate to get yards after the catch, a passing game that was ultra conservative, and it didn't work out. And I think they waited 5 weeks too late.
Yeah, Stafford could totally make those types of plays, but it's the product of the coaching, and that they don't adapt, that they aren't very creative, that they have a system in place that they just pound it and they run the ball the way that they want to run the ball, that they're going to stick with the running game and they're going to stick with the short passing game. They didn't really take chances. And, fortune favors the bold, and the Lions just weren't bold enough this year.
Before we take our first time out and maybe let you out of here quickly.
Yeah, I got to get out
family
of here.
Family calls.
Unfortunately, family comes first.
Family first. No, it's all good, man. Proud Papa. Hopefully all is good. But what are your plans for the big game? Super Bowl 51. Where's Jason Jarvie going to be watching?
I will probably be watching from home unless some party comes up. Maybe I'll go over to my brother's or some in-laws. But more than likely, I'll be watching from the comfort of my couch, and maybe we'll go get a pizza or something.
That's not bad. And next week, we'll break down a little bit more of the game. We'll look at it much more closely because there's an opportunity to listen to all the talking heads break down the game, and we'll get a chance to peek into what we want to. But I'm looking forward to it, too. I think either I'm going to go to my sister's house or one of her relatives and have a good old time, have some food, and enjoy the day's events, man. It makes it for a fun day.
Indeed. Well, I will leave the rest of the show in your capable hands. But until next week, I will see you guys next week. John.
Don't mess this up, right? I will mess it up.
Don't mess it up.
It won't be that much longer. Probably go 10, 15 minutes. I got something to talk about. Some news hit the wire as you were taking the phone call with the missus about Michigan football.
This out.
No worries. You'll hear it on the way home probably.
Okay.
See you, Jason. We'll take our first time out on the Motor City Sports Rant. Stick with us. Doc here for the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thank you for your continued support and allowing us to keep the studio lights on, the microphones hot here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. If you like what you're listening to, you like the variety of podcasts that you hear, definitely check out our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. That's the easiest way to support us. You get all the news from the network. You can check out the work from Vito, myself, all the guys that are putting out great content almost each and every day. And hey, if you're prone to shop online, click through that Amazon banner, go about your business, shop, and then when you're on that Amazon page, just bookmark it. Anytime at all that you make an online purchase, it kicks us back a little something and helps us keep this project going. We've been going strong since 2013, and that's been largely due to the support of our supporters, and we greatly appreciate it. DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Welcome back, everybody, to this abbreviated edition of the Motor City Sports Rant. Jason had to, leave early. Nothing too serious. Obviously, his wife is very close to delivering, so we'll see. Maybe by the time this airs, he'll be a proud papa, but it's always a great time when you're about to be a new dad. I remember early on for me when I was about to be a dad, it was such a hectic time because sometimes some pregnancies can be a little bit complicated. And my wife, in her first pregnancy, had some, complications and things like that. We had the baby, I believe, 6 weeks early. But you know what? I wouldn't trade any of the headaches for what I've experienced now in the last 4 years now, having 2 kids. It's a challenge, and anybody out there that has kids realizes that sometimes you have the best intentions at heart. You want to get out there, do a great podcast, rap with your boys about sports, but sometimes right in the middle of a great podcast, the phone rings and Jason has to handle his business. But like he says, he knows he can trust me to just turn on the mics and just let it rip. So as we were recording this, news broke regarding Michigan football and what's going to happen for them during the spring. And I believe when I saw it, Michigan had announced that they're going to take the squad and have some practices over there in Italy. And it seems to be very bold. It seems to be very expensive to take a team out of the country to practice or whatnot. But what people don't realize, and why I like this is great, and I like the opportunity that Michigan is providing for the student athletes is, and a lot of teams will go do that. They'll go practice, or maybe in terms of college basketball, they'll schedule a tournament away from the States or something, or maybe a tournament, in Hawaii or the Bahamas or something like that. Not only does it provide you an opportunity to bond with your teammates, but it provides the student athletes a cultural experience to see something different outside of the United States. And I mean, it says here that the team's going to visit historic landmarks, spend time with youth at orphanages, visit U.S. military, among other activities. And when you do all this stuff amongst your team, it allows for the team to bond. And it's one of those great things that the Michigan program can instill. And also, you got to realize that these athletes talk to each other, they text each other. And if you have an opportunity to take great trips like this, word gets around, and that also helps the recruiting process. So I think it's a great opportunity for the Michigan football team. And for those that find problems with it, you got to understand that Michigan is a cash cow. The football program is generating so much revenue. Michigan taking its team to Italy should not dent that wallet book all that much, in that they know that with Michigan, the products, the games, and with Jim Harbaugh, they're in a good situation financially right now. And why not? Why not allow the student athletes to get out there and to have some great experiences? And what I learned recently in terms of following recruiting is, not only is it important for the coaches to get out there, and it's probably the most important thing is to have a good relationship with the coaches that are recruiting, and that's why it's very important. But also, what I heard out there and what I learned is these athletes also help out in the recruiting process, in that recruits that have already kind of committed early will go out there and, host other recruits, and they show them around. They can show them a little bit about what they've experienced with the program. They are able to advocate on behalf of the University of Michigan. It's also very important for these athletes to know who their teammates are going to be, who they're going to be working with, who's going to be around in potentially their 3 or 4 years at the university. So these college institutions are doing whatever they can do to pull out all the stops to bring in big name talent. And Michigan has to do these kind of things because not only are they competing with Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, they're also trying to up the ante and trying to bring in national recruits. And how do you do that? Hey, you could come to Michigan and you could go to Italy. You could go to great places like Greece. And I'm sure that Jim Harbaugh right now is thinking about other ways that he can elevate Michigan's stature nationally. And that's what you got to do. And the age-old adage that everybody knows is, in order to make money, you got to spend money. And if you're a cheap program and you don't do things for the student athletes, you're not going to get the national guy. If there's 1 or 2 tiny factors that might be on a kid's mind, he may sway towards coming to Michigan if he knows that he's going to have a good time and have some great experiences with the guys that he's going to be playing football with. And so I give all the credit to Michigan. They're doing a lot of great things. Whenever you turn on the news or read the internet or check out what's going on, you see Jim Harbaugh doing the absolute best to try and get these guys in here. Now, there's been reports of a couple guys kind of decommitting, but that's to be expected when you have coaches that are leaving and things like that, because, these athletes develop a relationship with coaches, and if their guy has decided to take another job or gets a head coaching situation, then he may open up the recruiting process because, he may not be as comfortable with his spot, with what he's been told, and there is always the notion that, hey, at any given time, the program will look to upgrade and give out a commitment and give out a scholarship, even though they may not be willing to honor it because of the fact that, hey, another player comes along or something happens later in the process, and that makes it for a little bit of a messy situation in terms of recruiting. But Michigan's class at this point in time is unbelievable. It's a pretty decent class, and a lot of people are looking at it like, okay, if these guys can develop if Jim Harbaugh continues to bring on these talented guys from the state of Michigan and continues to bring on, people that will fit his program, that Michigan's going to have a lot of success. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that Michigan is on the road to a lot of big things, and we'll see in a couple of years what this class is able to accomplish. Now, the last thing I want to touch on is something that came about rather quickly regarding a rumor from ESPN regarding the Detroit Pistons. Everybody's been talking about what's gone on with the Detroit Pistons since Reggie Jackson has come back. They've played a little bit better, gotten a couple wins, but what you see is that the offense probably doesn't look like it's thriving as it should be with Reggie Jackson at the point. And so rumors came about from ESPN that potentially Stan Van Gundy was going to be looking to let him go or trade him for Ricky Rubio from Minnesota. And I believe Stan Van Gundy handled it appropriately. He just said, listen, throughout the course of my day, I get phone calls all the time, and other general managers will contact me and throw out names, and it's my job to kind of listen. And so it maybe did get out there that Ricky Rubio for Reggie Jackson was being discussed, but it wasn't going to be straight up. I'm sure the Pistons needed a little bit more and probably asked for a draft pick that Minnesota was nowhere near going to accept. So it's one of those things where you have a delicate balance of trying to keep the player happy. I'm sure Reggie Jackson didn't like to hear reports from Detroit Sports Podcast, from ESPN, from the news and Free Press that he was about to be traded, and Stan Van Gundy handled it appropriately. But the fact of the matter is this. Do you believe this Piston team led by Reggie Jackson is a team that can compete, that even though they have a lot of games coming up at home at the Palace, do you believe a team led by Reggie Jackson is going to take you far? No. When you look at it, Reggie Jackson is a backup. In my mind, he's yet to earn a status of being a starting point guard. All I view him as is Russell Westbrook's backup, and you paid him all this money, and look, couple years into a big deal, you can kind of tell that the team is not thriving as much as it should. And yeah, you could say leave this group together and see what they're able to do. But by most accounts, you kind of look at a team that might be around 500, the way they're performing and the way they take so many, 3-point shots, and they have to hit. It's one of those situations where I do believe that, if the team can fire on all cylinders night in, night out, it would be much more beneficial. But the team sometimes doesn't play as well defensively. They're inconsistent offensively, and they're struggling to kind of form an identity that they can recreate and compete with night in, night out. Are they an inside team? Are they a jump shooting team? Are they a strong defensive team? It's one of those situations where the team led by Reggie Jackson, sometimes the offense can stagnate. It has a hard time, competing against the better teams. And in situations where you play a good team, you have to have solid offensive sets much more often than when you make mistakes. And when Reggie Jackson's there leading the Pistons, you just get a sense that something's missing, that you feel like you need a much more responsible point guard. You need a point guard that can help run Stan Van Gundy's offense. And sometimes, for whatever reason, when Reggie Jackson's there, you see that the offense isn't as smooth. Ish Smith is able to do a lot of different things because he's a facilitator. And I know it's not easy to be an NBA point guard. You have only so many seconds to decide what to do in certain situations. I just believe that a point guard that shoots so much with the volume that Reggie Jackson needs, is it going to be conducive to an effective offense that Stan Van Gundy needs? I think he needs a facilitator. I just wish that maybe potentially Reggie didn't come back when he did, because you started to see what the Pistons were capable of with Ish Smith. He was, not the prolific scorer, but he was able to get his own shot, and he took it judiciously. And when he took them, he was shooting pretty well, enough to help the Pistons get wins. But once Reggie Jackson came back, it just seemed like there's been a rift that's developed between him and his other crew and Stan Van Gundy in particular. But in terms of how Stan Van Gundy handled it, I think he handled it admirably. And now we all have to look and point to how can the Pistons improve their roster, because I don't think you can leave this team as is. If you do, I believe that if you leave this Piston team alone and you don't make any moves, all you're going to get is a situation where the team enters the playoffs only to get destroyed by the likes of the top seeds. And I don't think you need that. I think you need a team that's going to be able to at least compete, maybe win a couple games and test a team. And I don't think that this group of talent led by Reggie Jackson is going to be a team that's going to be making noise. So I do agree with the fact that hopefully maybe someone makes a solid offer and you can go out there and do some things. But you definitely need, if you're going to go out there and get another player, you need a player that can really play well defensively, can be responsible, not to have too many turnovers, and can make his own shot. That's one of those things that it was glaring once KCP went out, that they didn't have a lot of guys that could consistently make their own shots. And so it's one of those things where you hope that the Pistons can look to improve. And, they have a stretch of games now at the Palace. The game versus Washington was impressive. It came down late. It didn't need to. They had a lead, but they kind of blew it in the fourth, but they were able to come back and secure the victory, which they need. At this point in time, the Pistons are a team that just needs as many victories as they can get because, in the East, it's not like in the Eastern Conference you can't go out there with a stretch of games and have victories. It's not like you can't move up because the Eastern Conference is one where around 500 should get you the 7th or 8th seed, but I think a lot of people are disappointed because we all had expectations that the Pistons would be a 4th seed, and so we'll see how this week progresses and how they continue to play because it's been up and down, and most people do believe that the Pistons are underachieving based upon the talent that they have, and that's why many people maybe feel like Stan Van floated that trade rumor to kind of send a message as well that, hey, nobody here on this team is, has a locked-in spot if you're not going to perform. And I really agree with that because, Reggie Jackson could do a lot more for this team. And I do think, though, he is a guy that you don't just give away. You can get something back for him, whether it be a first-round pick or a starting player that can play well defensively and things like that. But I do hope that Reggie Jackson doesn't take it personally and doesn't cause any more problems than he has already because, it's just one of those situations where you ask, can this team win with Reggie Jackson? When they signed him, I didn't think so. I didn't believe it, but, he is a good player. It's just that I don't think he's earned the right yet to be called a starting point guard. He's still got to do a lot more and do some things more to help this team get ahead in the postseason, not just get there. So with that, we'll wrap up this edition of the Motor City Sports Rant. Thanks again for finding us, downloading, and if you like what you're listening to, hey, tell one other person. Thank you. We'll see everybody next week. Thank you for listening to the Motor City Sports Rant on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Okay, nice, idiot. You. Bye-bye.
Good day, sir. I said good day.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.
Loser.